Goeiemiddag mensen. Okay, yes, I did just do well, I can't even call it a light scalp on the 11th of August. It was a hefty scalp. I took it down. The LM areas were over 50 mils. I took them down to just on 10. The rest was at about 35. It's down to 10 mil. So for the American blokes who watch, that's less than half an inch. And I will call this my first scalp. So it's kind of just like a dusting of the surface. It's not time to do it. I just wanted to. Let's see what happens. As you can tell, it's certainly not a light scalp. I'll pick up all over the place. Quite a lot going on here. It's a good enough amount, and the reason that I'm doing it is, as you can see here on my handful, is obviously all the brown mucky stuff, the winter dormant goodies, as well as a lot of green. And okay, part of what you're seeing right here is because of this drain dip that I started filling up. Remember, I did topsoil down here. I did one or two areas where there was silica, and I can clearly tell you, so the topsoil that closed up during winter. So I did it basically as we got into winter, whereas the silica areas, they are still actually battling, and that should be kind of obvious because of the much more organic nature of topsoil. So even if it's a very sandy topsoil, it is still much more of a treat for your lawn to be experiencing versus silica. Silica can smother. Remember, even though I've recommended silica a lot in the past, it is a finishing product. So for anybody who picked it up, don't misconstrue it. You should still be doing just plain top soil. So when you say top dressing, I'm referring to top soil. So up here where I am in Pretoria, we've got Valbrain topsoil, and we've got red as the two common types. I go with the Valbrain because I like the darker color, firstly, and it does what I need it to do. You can either have it mixed up with manures and that kind of thing, depending on your supplier. But when you go out there, just a word of caution is, don't just buy a bag of, let's say, something that says lawn dressing on it, because you don't know what their mix is. Most of the lawn dressings that I find in these packets at the nurseries and even some of the sand supplies are majority compost, and it's often coarse compost. That to me makes no sense. If you want to top dress with compost, it's going to be for a nutritional value that you think might be needed in your yard, and in that circumstance it should only be the best, most well fermented, sifted compost that you can get your hands on. It must be the finest, most broken down composted compost that you can get your hands on. And then as you get the majority of your lawn in a good condition, and you can actually see that you are experiencing more of like a consistency across the entire surface area, then you know that you've done your top dressing over the years relatively well. You can start sealing off the surface to get a better mow for like the cylinder mower guys. You're going to want that absolutely pristine finish on the surface. Then you can start, what I like to say is, seal it off with silica. So once you start with silica, you pretty much have to carry on with it, or it's going to be light dustings and then maybe another dusting of topsoil with it. You just can't have layers, because the grass is going to choose to, the root system is going to choose to sort of hibernate in zones or chill out in zones. So remember, if you've got too much compost on the surface, that means the grass is your roots aren't going to want to go down. Basically the gist of why I don't like it. Instead of the roots going deeper, they are going back up into this mattress full of moisture and nutrients and all that kind of like stuff that grass wants to grow in. It's going to hover there, but so are insects, and so is other junk. You want a sandier surface so that the roots want to go down deeper to where they can start finding nutritional value in water. That's why I like the liquid stuff. And also don't forget, when you've got a sandier surface, there's an additional value there, and that is that it allows the surface to dry faster as well. So whenever you apply something to the surface, it gets down below that topsoil layer quickly, and into a layer that's protected from the sun, so all the nutritional value is not being baked out by the sun, and that moisture is being held. Whereas the surface and the density of the grass and the thick of it, it's not holding moisture to cause you problems. It is the best way to do things in this regard. And yes, I'm still talking. Keep in mind, as a home gardener, even if you want a fine, pristine, real mowed lawn, you don't have to finish it off with silica. You can just leave it up to good topsoils moving forward. You can still go every now and then and do, let's say for example, like a a 50-50 plain topsoil with sifted compost, the good stuff that I was talking about just now. You can do like a 50-50 mix or a 70-30 mix or whatever. You just ask your sand supply to help you with those mixes. They'll do it if you're buying enough. And you put that down after you know what's going on in your soil. So you should try to get yourself a little probe. You pop a hole in the ground, you pull out a soil sample, and you can see what your existing soil profile looks like. We'll do that in a little bit. Alright, scalpy done. Okay, so even though I've spoken quite a bit now about topsoil in this video, this is not a topsoil video, this is not even a scalp video, this is a light scalp video. It's like my scalp number 1. It's just to do the rough cleanup, because if I picked up these clippings, which I didn't, I'll talk to you about that in a sec, I probably would have had to have carted away about 20 bins, the mower bins worth of clippings, and that is, I just didn't feel like it. So what I'm going to do now is just let the stuff dry out, because that will remove some of the weight, and because as you saw just now there was a lot of green in it. Let the stuff dry out. Don't leave it for a week or 2 weeks or whatever, because you will smother your grass, especially in those areas. I proved that in another video some time back. So just let it dry out now. Maybe a day or two later I'm going to come back with the mower and its catcher, and we'll suck up all this junk and then just reassess where we currently stand. So here's just a view from the other side. You can tell there's a lot of green there. The white that you're seeing now is because I just plowed all of that winter junk off the surface. And just be careful, even I, being in Pretoria, there's still a chance that there's another frost coming. I'm just dumb, so don't do it. If I'm being cautious on your behalf, if you live in Edenvale or in the south of Joburg, don't scalp your lawn right now. You are really taking a chance. If you scalp your lawn and you just got little stalkies left behind and you get a frost, especially if those things have just started sprouting and then you get a frost, you're going to really do serious damage to your lawn. Now, you would also notice that I just went at it, and that means that the LM got mowed down to that 10-ish mil mark like the Kikuyu and the Bermuda did. Not the best idea, and not in general. I just did it now, partly to show you what happens when you do it. You can see here, I've really opened up the soil and thinned out this LM quite substantially. This is now the LM under my trees. When you do this to LM, not only is it unsightly, but you run the risk of killing it off even during the growing season. You can have these big patches, and you don't want that. You can clearly see that I've just got ground and a bird of green coming up here, so I took a big chance on this. I'm not advising that you do it, but we can use this as an experiment to really see what happens when somebody does something like this. So I imagine there I'm going to have a bald patch for a couple of weeks or a month, and then the rest I think it will actually come back, because in some areas I haven't taken off the crown or hit the crown. So for example here you can see I've removed this is the whole crown gone. There's a bit of it gone. There's a bit of it, a good portion of it gone. That is like the end of that entire section. Sometimes it even kills off the runner, the stola on here as well. So just actually don't do it. There is no reason that you need to scalp LM. It's a grass that needs to grow on top of itself to form structure. It has no rhizome system like a Kikuyu and Bermuda does. It's just stoloniferous, so just the runners on the surface with little tiller looking root system that just sort of tacks itself to the ground. Now when it can't tack itself to the ground, it wraps itself around the mass of other runners that are below it as well, and that's what forms a really strong LM, this tropical grass structure. So you do not need to verticut LM. You do not need to actually even worry about any sort of hectic soil, because it basically just sits on the surface. Even though the roots can get deep, it's not what's imperative about it. Whereas Kikuyu and Bermuda, well, even those are quite hardy. But yeah, definitely don't need to verticut LM. You definitely don't need to try and groom it in any way. You don't need to try and power rake it. None of that stuff. Definitely not scalping, because you are probably going to kill it. Because when you've chopped off the top, it doesn't have anything left in the ground like a rhizome system that the Kikuyu and Bermuda would have, to just sort of push itself back up again. You're going to have bald spots for ages. Just don't do it. Okay, and then just sorry about the angle grinder in the background. Let's just talk about the clippings for a second. As you'll note here, I've got a lot of clippings lying around, and I mentioned to you earlier on that I'm going to leave them to let them dry out. Now, where that's beneficial by leaving clippings on the ground is that you are going to, some of that nutrients is going to sort of like strain itself out, almost like a tea bag. You're going to put some water down, that moisture is going to sap itself out of the stuff as it dehydrates, out of all the groggy bits and pieces and some of the green that I've cut out. And then I'm going to now water it probably tonight or tomorrow morning. We let that sit for a day or two, and then once it's dried out, that's actually the end of your reasoning, your logical reasoning for wanting any clippings on your grass at any given time. You just want to sap some of that nutritional value back into the soil, then get rid of the crap. Because anything that needs to be composted, let's put it this way. There is a reason that people have compost heaps. And the heap is because composting is best kept to a heap. You don't want it to be happening on the surface of your soil. That's why you want composts, and we use the term good quality or high quality composts, well fermented composts, because they've already gone through the composting process. So you get that first little boost, and you can see that there's a bit of green happening, but effectively you're actually wasting a bit of energy. That's what I don't like. I don't feel the necessity for you to put compost on the surface of your lawn, only if you've got like these specific circumstances. But for the average guy with normal yard, even if it's not perfect, like mine is really far from perfect. I've showed you guys before. This here, this is my ground. This right here, I've got the thickness of the sod that was put down here by the previous owner, 10 or 15 years ago or whatever, and he never top dressed this thing after the initial installation is what he told me. So he's got sod thickness on this crap, and this grass it's fine. I mean, it's not perfect, we know that. I'm kind of doing that on purpose to show you stuff in videos as well, but that's the objective. You can grow grass on almost anything. You just gotta know these little bits and pieces in between. That's what we're learning right now. Okay, this video I assume is going to be too long for even me to want to deal with, so I'm going to end it at that. Basic idea is I've started scalping. We'll see how that transpires in the next little bit. It's still going to get another 1 or 2 before I even do the topsoil. Definitely before you do any top dressing, you're going to need to do some sort of a very short mow or a scalp. And we'll talk a little bit more about the in-depths of all these things as we progress through the season, because scalping, it's so common that I almost don't want to say don't do it, but you got to choose your battles carefully when it comes to scalping. It's not so straightforward. You can damage your grass. You need to know what grass type you have. Anyway, I've got bits and pieces of information for the guys who are just picking up on this kind of video, just getting started. Go have a look at my website and read some of the blog stuff, have a look through a few of the pages. I'm still busy updating a whole bunch of things, but I'm trying to make like basic blurbs of information that should help you take those first couple of steps. And the very first thing is for anybody who's just thinking about getting started with having a lacquer lawn now in this spring, is that you actually don't even need to do any of that stuff. You don't have to top dress, you don't have to scalp it. You can just fertilize it, water it, and mow it. Those are the 3 most important things from taking your grass into its lawn position that you want. You want a lawn, not just grass. That's really it. That will get you going. Once you've learned those little basics and you're starting to enjoy your new great looking lawn as it's starting to progress, then you can get into the more advanced stuff and figure it all out as you progress. It's part of your lawn care journey. Anyway, please like and subscribe. We'll see you in the next one. Cheers.